Come join Melissa and her guests on the Chats from the Blog Cabin podcast. From North Carolina, this podcast will have you feeling like you've known these folks for years. Listen in as they chat about life, culture, current events, and more, all with a special Southern flair. Curl up with your favorite beverage and get ready to be entertained. Tune in now for a unique experience that's fun and insightful.
Hey, y'all. Welcome back to another episode of Chats from the Blog Cabin. You know, the show where I virtually invite people into the blog cabin to chat about life. And today we are talking with Dr. Nicki, who wrote The Divine Traumatty of Nicki Joy, a true grime story, which I love the play on words, grime story, because there's a lot of grime in the story. But Dr. Nicki, tell us a little about yourself before we get into your book.
I have to say, Melissa, I always, anytime someone says, hey, y'all, I always want to say, hey, y'all. My mother was actually born in a little town in Kentucky called Paintsville, which, by the way, if there is a grave, she's rolling over right now, but there isn't. Anyway, she lied and always said she was from New York because she was so embarrassed to be from Kentucky. But really, I have some Southern roots in me. So I kind of go, hey, y'all. But that's not really me at all. Anyway, I'm great. Thank you for having me on.
And tell us a little about yourself before we get into your book.
Well, I don't know what, my book does tell all about me. I would say that when I was about to publish the book, I thought, dear, they're either going to line up around the corner or run as fast as they can to the nearest exit when they read this. And you'll laugh, you'll cry, you'll cringe, kind of thing. But the little about myself is that I have really made the best lemonade you've ever tasted in your life out of the worst lemons. Not the worst story I've ever heard. My story isn't the worst story. I'm a therapist, so I hear dreadful stories all the time. However, it's enough to have me launched into a life that lacked self-esteem for most of the time. And even when I had some, I didn't have just quite enough to get me over the line and into what some people are aiming for, which is nirvana. Spoiler alert, there is no such thing. Okay. But I'm really proud of myself. I have gone from self-hatred to self-love. I've gone from just daily terrible choices to a life I never imagined. And I imagined something more that was very fantasy driven, and I was just sort of witnessing it. And I imagined a lot less, which is what I lived. But the funny thing is, all along the way, and you know this, Melissa, because you read the book, I always looked better than I felt. This was the thing. And I think that resonates with a lot of people. I always look better right now we're living a Facebook life everywhere, right? Everybody's filtered and, whatever we are to make sure that I have sometimes people in my office and then I go and look on their Instagram, an hour later and I'm like, who is that woman? I didn't just sit with that. Those are different lips. It's different. I don't know what's happening here. But we're so afraid to be authentically ourselves. And I understand that because I lived that life for a very long time. So I'm excited to be here and have something to say about how life can work better.
For sure, because obviously you were second grade when you were sent off to boarding school. Was that how old you were? I can't even imagine sending my three girls off to boarding school at the time.
Oh my goodness. A couple of times, a couple of different men I've been with have thought that it's really a good idea for me to go back and visit, since I've lived here in California a bunch of years, to go and my first boarding school was in Ojai, California. And they thought, oh, well, we should go visit. It sounds wonderful. I'll surprise her and just take her there. And the first guy that took me there, and he was a lovely man, truly. And I couldn't get out of the car. I started hyperventilating. I mean, and had already done, a decent amount of work on myself, but was nowhere near healed. And I couldn't get out of the car. And I looked around and there were these little children that were about the age of when I started. My heart just started beating. I couldn't stand it. And then my lovely happily ever after story, which you haven't gotten to yet at the end of the book, Tom took me up there and my best friend went with us and we were there, and it's changed so much. When I was there, it was all boarding school kids who slept over, and like maybe there'd be one or two, people who were just in the day part and then they go to their homes. But when I was there, we're mostly boarding. Now it's mostly people who just come there almost like a private school, but they go home at night. But anyway, this sometimes the things that come out of my mouth, dear Dr. Nicki. So this principal clearly new to me. I mean, it had been a million years. And he came up to us and Tom said, "Oh, yes, she went here when she was a kid." He loves to volunteer that. And I said, and he said, "Oh, really? What was it like then? What did you remember?" And out of my mouth came horses and sadness. And this poor fellow, he sort of dropped his dignity off the side of the side of the street and kind of, well, enjoy, and kind of walked away. And I thought, oh dear, I just have aspired to and included in my personality now. You ask me a question, I will give you an answer. I'm not going to pretend. I'm going to tell you what I know in the moment. And oftentimes things come out of me that I didn't even know I knew in the moment. And I honor that and respect that, because a lot of times the psyche knows more than the brain. Most of the times the psyche knows more than the brain.
For sure. I mean, honestly, after reading, first of all, that was kind of heartbreaking to me, being sent off when you were little, but then seeing your relationship with your mom. I mean, she just didn't want kids, or what was it? Because I was like, I can't even imagine.
Well, as you go on with my mom, I think it's a big payoff at the end. But I think, she was brought up, her mother was a hard hit and run the business kind of an entrepreneur. And my mother was that. She really wanted to be a man. And she lived up, through a time where that was not particularly popular. And she always ran the show. And that's the way she wanted it, because I think she felt so powerless in herself. And she was, of course, a terrible drunk as well. But she obviously didn't start out that. We're not three and we started out being a drunk. But, she worked all the time. She did well. And the men she was with, my stepfather, who obviously, as you know from the book, is a very important person in my life, worked, they said with her, but really he worked for her. And she just wanted to feel important, I believe. I don't think she felt important in her family. She's the oldest. The middle child was a boy, and he was, of course, more important because he was a boy. And the youngest was the beautiful youngest girl, and she got babied and got a lot of things my mom didn't get. So it was just one of those almost simple stories. I don't think my grandparents had time for her or the other kids. They all ended not so great as well. And so, of course, at the time, it doesn't make any difference. We are being impacted by their choices, as your children are being impacted by your choices. And we only know what we know. My mother really wasn't let's go to therapy or seek help here kind of a person. Just like, I'll get the job done. I can do everything. And I inherited a lot of that. I'll do it all. And that served me until it didn't. But also there was a seeker in me. I'm not sure where that seeker came from, but it felt very organic to my soul's journey. And that seeker really saved my life, because I did a lot of spiritual seeking and self-understanding seeking, and climb the mountain and beat the pillows and all the things we do in those ways, and it really was incredible. But only my mother can answer that in a deep way. But I feel like her personality got away from her. The woman I saw in the final moments of her life was without personality, because she was in full dimension. All of the stuff had fallen off, and there was just the soul there. And her soul was what souls are, beautiful and intact and wondrous. I just didn't live with that person. Yeah. I was lucky to have met that at all. And she was my most important teacher, for sure. And sometimes the teachers are good and sometimes the teachers are not so good, but it's up to us to figure it out. We are in charge of that. And I think that's a very empowering statement. Some people hate it. I am so busy pointing the finger of blame over there. And I always say to people, did you notice the three fingers are pointing back? Also, have you noticed that one's pointing up? And also, have you noticed it looks like a gun? So all in all, it ain't a good choice. We have to take the responsibility back. And that's where freedom is. Freedom for women, for men, for children, for whatever. I don't care how old you are. It's never too late to learn.
It's never too late to change. And I love the fact that you said that your mom wasn't into therapy, but then you end up becoming a therapist.
Of course, Now remember, I was going to be an actress. No, Susan, I was going to be famous. I was going to be a famous actress. And, listen, I did all the things, but it just wasn't my destiny path, I would say. And I really, when I discovered that this was it, this was it. This is what I meant to do. It was really quite blissful. And then the only thing to do was to put one foot in front of the other and make it happen, which I had turned out to be very good at. I mean, I was pretty good at everything I did. I was a fabulous alcoholic addict. I mean, I was a fabulous overeater. I mean, I did it. When I did something, I did it, When I picked bad, I picked the worst.
Your relationships.
Oh, yeah.
Because you survived a lot in your relationships as well.
I did. I survived and then I thrived. And again, the thing that let me thrive in the final analysis, maybe not during, but in the afterbirth, so to speak, or death, was that I kept going back to this idea of what did I do to contribute to this thing that happened? Not what did he do, but what did I do? What was my part of this? And, that's very powerful because we can only change other people. Believe me, I spend all day setting a banquet table that some people eat from and some people don't. But I'm not, and they'll go, oh, you saved my life. No, I did not save your life. You saved your life because you made choices. And by the way, I'd rather give up the credit while also giving up the responsibility.
I love that.
Yeah. I mean, clients will say to me, you didn't fix my wife. That is correct. I never fix anybody. She decided not to eat from the banquet. That's not my fault.
That is so true. Now, what made you decide to write your book, though?
Well, the illness, the 18 months of illness started before COVID. And I had an office that could be anywhere between 22 minutes and an hour and a half from here, depending on traffic going and coming. And so when Conrad first got ill, his first illness was throat cancer. I remember he was a lot older than me too, so he wasn't a kid. But I was far away when he went to his first emergency room and you know what I mean? And somebody else had to take him, and that was not okay with me. And I didn't get help for the first part of the illness for the throat cancer. I did everything myself because I'm going to do everything yourself person. I used to be, not anymore. Then COVID hit and I just needed to be near him, right? So not only didn't hold on to my office at that point, I shut down my office and converted everything to Zoom, right? So I was literally feet away from him to be here for him and all of that. Now, during the second set of illnesses, because we had about 2 months off between illnesses, I started having caregivers come in because I was running a full business. I was, whatever. I didn't sleep for about 2 years. So I'm in that part, right, where it's devastating. I'm seeing him go from like being 240 or something. In the end, he was 80 pounds, that thing. And I'm with him at the chemo. I'm with him at the radio, and I'm in thing. And we're going to the ER, which I can't get into because it's COVID and you're not allowed in. So you have to send them off. It was just dreadful. And all the time I was trying to take care of myself, but I was finding it very, very difficult. I didn't want to talk to friends about how terrible it was because I thought if I say one word, I will collapse. And that's very contrary to the way I know how to live. But I had 3 teeth crumble. I was, my stomach was on fire. I was a mess physically myself. But I had started getting help. Now, when you have caregivers 20 hours a day, and then I would take my shifts, so to speak, you're now dealing with all these personalities. So now we call this, as you know from the book, we started calling it Monty Abbey, right? So I had all these different people here, and I was dealing with them, and some of them were this, and some of them that, and was like just finding the right bed to sleep in, right, so to speak. And so a friend of mine, who's this wonderful astrologer, said, you know what, you should be writing all this down because you'll need it later. I had no idea what he meant, but I followed directions, and I started keeping an online journal about just the illness part, really, mostly. Or today I felt, like I wanted to commit Harry Carey, whatever. It's just too hard, whatever. I'm complaining. I don't want to complain. I don't want to complain. I just want to be gracious, all the things. And so I started writing. I also reached out because it's this world. I reached out and looked for a therapist. I had not been in, I'd done a lot of super high-end work with groups and things like that. I had a mentor for 17 years, but I hadn't, he was now dead, and I hadn't worked with anybody in a very long time. So I sought a spiritual, mature person who had been through some things and all that. And I found the most wonderful therapist in Spain, an Englishman living in Spain. Only in the world today would that have been able to happen. So, and I worked with him for a year on all of this, but I was writing the whole time. Writing has always been a kind of solution for me. I started writing when I was very, very young. So, and I've written several novels and nonfiction self-help books and everything. But anyway, I was just writing about stuff. I thought, well, Conrad is so interesting. I'll just write about him in the final. When I first decided to actually do the book, I'll just write about him. And my first draft of the book, I gave to a friend of mine who's a wonderful writer and an actor and a director. And I said, he said, well, what is this book about? I said, it's about my experience with Conrad and the dying. He said, well, then you have to be in the book. I said, well, that's bizarre. And and then it started to be sort of a therapy book, and the learning sort of thing, and that was boring. And then it looked like a screenplay, and that didn't have enough. Anyway, it turned into this teaching memoir, where, as you know, the teaching comes through the stories, and I'm so proud of it and so excited. But that all started with my friend saying, "Just keep some notes; you'll need them later," because you really do have death and dying fog as things go. You just aren't. I mean, I was taking somebody with me. I had an assistant that I hired during that time to go with me, and he was doing a lot of other things around the house I couldn't handle or didn't want to handle, to hear what the doctor said, because I stopped being able to hear the doctor. I just, how it is, right? You just can't hear. You want to. It's not that you don't want to. And if you were with somebody else and their doctor, you would hear their doctor, but you can't hear yours. And so that's how the book started. And then it grew, and then it changed. And then I met, and I'll say it this way because it's true, the love of my life, my happily ever after ending. His wife had also died of cancer. He was in a 40-year marriage, and his wife had died of cancer. And he had the most extraordinary history. He had a great family who he still loved and were in touch with. And his children fight to be over like, no, come to my house. No, come to my house. Wow. I mean, that my job self-selects, and my self-loathing self-selected. Mm-hmm. So I didn't know that this was a thing in the world. So crazy. And he's, smart, and he's all the things, and so kind and so loving and such a partner and everything. So when I started dating, I was on the apps because I'm a modern woman. And it is a full-time job, I'm telling you, when you're doing that. But anyway, and I found out it was exactly the same as when I first dated. It was just really interesting, but except that I was different. Anyway, I was on the apps, and one of the guys I went out with said to me, hey, do you think that this dead husband will come between us? And I said, I don't know. This is all new to me. What do I know? But I thought it was such an interesting question. And then when I saw that on his profile that Tom was a widower, I thought, I don't want that. I mean, what are we going to do? Sit around talking about dead people all day long? To me. So I told him this, and he laughed, and we laughed a lot together. And I'm like, okay. Fast forward, he helped me so much with my book, and he loves to tell the story. Yeah, she didn't want to sit around talking about dead people. Meanwhile, I have spent over 4 years, we're now 4.5 years going into 5, reading about her dead husband. This is fun. Somehow I lost the thread of the intention here. He's such a good sport about it. I mean, it's really terrific. So, that has been an amazing emerging, because what happens, spoiler alert, is that I do I'm finally able to surrender completely to love, my relationship to my choices, what I was able to attract in the final analysis was so different. Somebody who's really into wholeness and seeks it has the same interests I have. Conrad and I didn't have any of the same interests.
Wow.
And I thought I was so proud of that. I said, I'm telling you, I don't want a clone. I love that he is politically, spiritually, intellectually interested in all the things different than me. Age much older. I'm good with that. You know what? That wasn't true. I had a lot of resentments and all the things. So now there I was at the end, taking care of the man who I had all these resentments and expectations of, and he had not fulfilled those expectations. Now, that being said, he loved me like I used to say he loved me more than anybody has ever been loved in the history of the world. And he knew that he loved me more than I loved him, and he was okay with that.
Wow. And
just loved me. And as you know from the book, being the center of Love World was not my history. So that piece was a healing I really needed. And I sat, I put aside all the other things really for that piece. And that piece was great for a couple of decades.
Yeah, for a couple of decades.
And then not so much, but our ending together was quite beautiful, really beautiful. He died. He was such a good dyer. He did death so much better than I did his death. I mean, he was just brave and insistent and loving and kind to everybody and grateful. So grateful for everything he got and whatever the attention was. He didn't love that I wasn't able to spend more time with him because I was trying to keep everything afloat and all that. And so it really was, I've had some wonderful relationships with dying.
Yes.
They die throughout. It's been part of my journey, whether it's clients and other things. I've just had some very genuinely beautiful instructions about dying during those times, and his was the best of all, of course.
Wow. We need to take a brief commercial break, but we'll be right back.
The threats women face today are unparalleled and even more dangerous than ever before. 1 in 3 women globally has been the victim of an assault. Women are terrified, and they are looking for answers.
In the book, Street Smart Safety for Women, we draw on our experiences, both personal and professional, to provide those answers. It's by women, for women. Street Smart Safety for Women is available wherever books are sold.
And we are back with Dr. Nicki. I will say, when you were talking about, right before we went to the break, about having great experiences with death, I put down something that just tore at my heart because I have a 14-year-old Shih Tzu, and you write about your Shih Tzu
No,
Molly.
I have a picture at the beginning.
Yeah. And she will be 15 this year. And when I heard Shih Tzu and Molly, I'm like, I know I'm gonna immediately love this woman because she's my whole heart right now. She's like the baby because the girls are older and they're pretty much out of the house. So that's my baby.
Yeah. I had another Shih Tzu also, Ming, which I had rescued from another thing, but that's another long story. But Shih Tzus are so funny. Conrad used to say, she's that stubborn and that, whatever, because they remember that they sat by the side of the Buddha and they're like, that. She was the most, I remember Conrad used to wear these sort of fatigue or bush jacket things, like a uniform. He wore it every day. Lots of pockets. He needed lots of pockets for all the things he carried. He wasn't going anywhere, you understand? He sat in a chair and read most of the time, but he had all these pockets. So I thought Molly was a birthday present for him, right? And so I thought, I should dress them some. So I'm going to get one of those little, like a camo t-shirt, dog camo t-shirt. And I put her in that shirt and she went absolutely catatonic. She would not move. And I waited to see what would happen. And she was not going to move never until I took that thing off her. She was the stubbornest. I got a lot of Molly stories, but I miss her and I miss them all. And Bruno now, my youngest, I had 3 cats and 2 dogs at one point, and I got Bruno. So then I had 2 and 3, and he is so happy to be an only child. He watched them all die. I picture him in the living room, crossing them off his list. More for me. And so now for like 5 years or something, he's been an only child. And he is the biggest little brat and so adorable. I love him to pieces. And he's about 16, 17. So, he may outlive me, but it's not probable. But, they are, because they're unconditional.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah.
And they appreciate you when nobody else does, basically.
I know. And they don't care if I'm getting fat or thin or I'm looking good or my hair's a mess. They don't care.
All they care about if you have food in your hand, if you're going to get any of it. They're going to get any of it.
Right.
So now let's turn back to the book, and you can read part of your book. Are you ready to read?
I am. That was a surprise. I mean, I should have been forewarned, but I decided in my infinite wisdom that you were going to read part of my book. Anyway, this is way down in the book, chapter 26. And I just read, it's called Let the Contest Begin. And it starts with a quote from John Steinbeck. We have only one story. All novels, all poetry are built on the never-ending contest in ourselves of good and evil. And we get to decide what good and evil means, by the way. Okay, fighting for good. Life sets us up to expect death. Our animals die, grandparents, other relatives, and occasional friends die. Public figures die. We're pummeled with war, death, stats. Math, shooting, deaths keep escalating. Conversations about capital punishment, abortion, and gun control happen every day. It should all help when we're facing the hardest personal death experiences we have. Often it doesn't. I was drowning in a new level of heartbreak, probably because, even including parents, I was losing the most stabilizing love I'd ever known. I wanted to face the sad music vulnerably. Most people define vulnerability as unwanted, dangerous, or weak feelings. I'd long ago realized that I wouldn't be able to think or organize my way into vulnerability. But what if vulnerability only leads to an endless pit of despair, I worried. That's giving vulnerability a bad rap. A better, truer definition would be the open-hearted expression of our essential emotional truths. But everyone knows that being unguarded is not easy in this world, especially if right from the jump we were self-conscious, afraid, or embarrassed. For the longest time, I didn't even consider vulnerability. When I was with vicious Jose, you have to read the book to find out what that means. For instance, I didn't have it in me to explore the death of my barely born baby boy. At that point, my dramatic ignorance morphed into icy denial. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps, I told myself at the time. Stop whining. I often confused invulnerability with strength. My defensiveness compelled me to dismiss my feelings. Besides, for the longest time, I saw myself as a bad person who deserved what she got. Was I? Not really. Treating yourself badly doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you a person with emotional dysmorphia, which means you see yourself as a bad person, though you are not. Your distorted vision of self. What does it mean to be a good woman anyway? I'd always defined it as being a person of integrity and loyalty, saying what I mean and meaning what I said. Later, I realized that for me, goodness needed to include being brave, compassionate, generous in mind, spirit, and in giving. It meant courageously sharing my vulnerable truths by letting others know when I was suffering. For much of my life, none of that had been available to me. Still, I knew everything needed to start with honest self-assessment. Well, that sounds perilous, I thought, when I first considered it all. This is going to take practice. Lots and lots of practice. And it did. Over a decade later, my pain about my baby's early death began to surface. By then, I'd pushed my story so deeply back and down, I barely remembered it. Then, when Elizabeth also gave birth at 5.5 months to a baby boy who couldn't be saved, my pain floodgates opened. Watching Elizabeth's tiny child's coffin slide into the flames, I cried softly for the son who never was. Briefly, I fell back on my old self-shame standby. I killed my baby with my bad behavior. I thought, I'm awful. But self-flagellation no longer protected me from real grief. One night, a powerful dream came to me. I call it the Beast Man dream. I'm being chased by a terrible brute who's screaming at me constantly. I'm going to get you, bitch. I'm going to get you, bitch. I'm running and running. Suddenly, I stop, stand still, and turn to face the beast. As I look him in the eye, he immediately transforms into a beautiful floor-to-ceiling stained glass cathedral window. As soon as I catch the beauty of what I see, the entire glass pane shatters into 100 pieces. I see the colorful mosaic fragments piled high on the ground, waiting to be created into something new. My interpretation of that dream: fears only have as much power as we give them. When we face those fears, we transform them. Transformation is a holy endeavor. It's up to us to make something useful out of the ragged edged pieces life creates. There's a lot more in that chapter, but I think that's a good place to end.
Yeah, that is a lot more. And a matter of fact, I didn't send it in the talking points, but I wanted to talk about the impact of that baby boy, because written throughout the whole, and the fact that you chose that part to read, it's like that. I was like, should I ask about it or should I not ask about it? But let's talk about the impact of that baby.
It's always front and center for me. You know, I did a lot of things that I told myself the baby would come back to me, that it was a soul waiting to find me again. You know, I did all the things that sort of spiritual people do. I'm not at all religious. And I'll insult some of your listeners, I'm sure, where you are, but to say, I find that too often people use religion to separate and rather than to bring people together. And I find that annoying. Listen, your God's as good as my whatever, and my whatever is as good as your God from my point of view. So stop telling me I'm wrong. You're right. You're going to good places and I'm going to nowhere. So we're either all going to nowhere or it's all great and whatever. Okay. So, but I told myself a lot of things about that. And I was still, you know, the minute I lost that baby and when I got out of my relationship with Jose, or even when I was still in it for a few minutes afterwards, I started drinking again, you know, and I wanted to be numb and I went numb. And so I just told myself a lot of lies, as if I knew them to be true, and with full-heartedness and full trust that the baby was going to come back to me. And, you know, I never was in another position for that to happen. I didn't choose. You know, Conrad was a lot older and he had children way back. He had screwed that up plenty because he had been an alcoholic at that time too. And he did not want another child. And I just used his desire to not have a child to be lazy about insistence, you know. And I'd always pictured that I would have this, you know, I was going to have this home of orphans that I'd gotten from around the world, one of my childhood fantasies. And then one day I realized that I've had a lot of children, so to speak, because, and people tell me this all the time, they'll argue with me, you are the mother of us all. And I'm like, well, cool. And I didn't have to, you know, pay for college. So that's not bad. But that being said, it is not the same thing. Yeah. So I've had all these different feelings about it over the years, and mostly I had no feeling about it because I refused to go there. But that is not me standardly and effectively and at my core. So, you know, I've now been sober 43 years. So I've done a lot of work. I did a lot of work before sobriety, but, you know, you hit a wall. If you're an addict and you don't get sober, you can just learn so much and then you have to get sober. So what's happened recently, I will tell you, Melissa, which is really stunning to me. You know, I can cry about this at any time. I have full access to my vulnerability at this point. But the daughter of Tom's now deceased wife, and she, you know, died of cancer, and it was very quick. And I had the long goodbye. He had the hello goodbye kind of thing. In terms of the illness, it was quick. And his daughter they really struggled to have this child. He had an older child from his first marriage, and then his wife brought two children into the marriage and he raised them as his own, but they together wanted to have a child and they struggled. And then this sort of miraculous thing happened, and then they had this wonderful girl. She really is the sweetest person I think I've ever met in my life. I'm kind, I am not sweet. She tells me I'm sweet, but that's because she wants to think that. But anyway, so right away, so now here she is, she's having her first baby, and she was born to be a mother, 100%. I mean, she had a profession, everything. born to be a mother. And they immediately, and even his older daughter tried to get her kids to call, to say, this is your new grandmother. I'm like, well, really? I mean, they're practically teenagers, two of them. And the other one is like, I'm not forcing myself on anybody, but I let them come to me, and I've become, I believe myself closer to one or the other at various, but I think that, I have a relationship with them that I feel good about. But that's not the same thing as a baby. So now, subsequent to her mother's death, it's a couple of years in at this point, and she birthed this baby who is now, I think he's just turned 7 months. And of course, he's the cutest baby in the universe. But anyway, she immediately says, you are grandma. You're it. That's it. And I'm like, okay. And I've been so much about earning, I have to earn that. I didn't birth you. And I'm not, doesn't feel. So I remember the first time I held him, which was, shortly after he was born, a few days after he was born. And I had just layers of feelings. I had love, had doubt, do I deserve this? Should I even do this? I just had all these layers of feelings. And mostly I recognized the miraculous thing that happened for me. And I took it personally in a wonderful way. I thought, this is what a gift. Who could have anticipated this? Never. I mean, the men who, I never thought of this. When I started dating again, it never occurred to me. And there'll be a grandchild that won't have a mother, that won't have a grandmother because the mother's gone. So we see this child once or twice a week. Tom always sees him twice. I, don't necessarily have the leisure because they live in Orange County, which is quite far away from Burbank. It's an hour to 2 hour drive. Watching him grow. And what's funny is she was listening to daughter, Taylor, who I just love, and said, you really are me in this way and in this way. Both of the kids, I have this. Yeah. But I say, wait, where was I going with this? That she says, you're definitely good. But she was listening to the book while she was pregnant. So she's convinced that he knew my voice before any other voice, of course, hers and her husband's. And he did kick first for me. I said, I will tell you this. It is very important that he do all of his first while I'm there. Yep. And I had Graham to come out. Tom calls me Graham Cracker because I'm such a wild card. So whatever he ends up calling me. And he really is the happiest baby ever because she has so much joy in her. Taylor. And they're terrific parents. And there's 2 older kids that he had from another ranch. It's all the blended family is all the rage. But so I have this experience, and there are moments, and they strike me. I don't go out for them. I don't predict them. Where I go, my boy. It was I was greatly responsible for him. First of all, in those days, as were today, they would have saved that child. But in those days, they didn't have the equipment. And also, I had behaved badly, not with the drinking, but I was working too much and doing too much. And I was warned about it, and I ignored it. And I stayed in high stress and trying to get my drunken husband out of the bar. And, I did these terrible things to my body, not really thinking ahead. And so that was what happened. And it's not my finest memory or my finest set of decisions. On the other hand, I am 100% sure that child would not have had a father because I would never have stayed there even another minute. And my entire life would not be what my life has turned out to be. And so would I be sitting here with you talking about my book? No. Would I had the great blessing of offering the possibility of change and healing to thousands and thousands of people as I have over the years? Probably not, my life would have gone in a different direction.
Wow. I mean, I'm just choking up as you were telling this story about the grandchild. I'm like, that's the son coming back to you. You said you kept looking for him to come back to you. You didn't know it was going to come back to you in a grandson way. So that is like full circle. And you talk about helping all these people. Now, I'm going to get to the Kardashian of it all because I went last night and watched the episodes that you were on. So how did that come about? Because I can't even imagine, because you in your bio, it even says that you're the therapist of the stars. So I can't even imagine that.
I was dubbed that by other people. And the stars I was talking about are the stars that have chosen to sit in my office. This was a TV stint, and it was one episode, although they broke it into 2 episodes God, I look tired. They broke it into 2 episodes, but it really was one episode. And I was asked to come on by a producer that knew of my work. And of course I said yes. And, I appreciate the reference, and some people have seen me. I got some clients from it, but really I got many more from the Millionaire Matchmaker because I sort of did magic with a client or 2 while I was on that show. But they really had no interest in doing that, as they were said. And I didn't know who they were when I went on, basically. I'd seen their picture as I was checking out at the, market or whatever. I didn't really, and I've done that a lot. I was on 9 episodes of the 2 Corys. I was their therapist, and I always say this. My PR people at the time said, don't put this on your resume. And I said, why not? And he said, well, because Corey Haim is dead. I said, but I did not kill him. I don't understand why. I tried to heal him. He just didn't want to heal, and I liked the guy. I really did, but he did not want to heal. It's not my fault. But anyway, so I'm talking about it now, and it's all those years later, and I don't care. People are going to think what they're going to think. That happened because I was asked to go on the show, and I said yes. There, some of my peers, I don't have a lot of therapist friends, but some of my peers thought that I was selling out. For me, if I can have more audience to get a little healing in, I think that was, and the producers thought that it ended up being picked as one of the top 100 reality shows, that episode.
Wow.
That I was in. And I don't know what that means, and I don't know who makes that list. I'm always in curiosity about the they said, but I saw it in print, and I never did know what it meant. But I was just very real with them. And the producers had told me ahead of time that probably Chris was going to talk about her new book. And so there's going to be some stuff, which of course I've never read, but the stuff about infidelity and things like that. I'm like, whatever, I'm good. But that's not what happened. Because when I said to Robert, I said, what's your name? And I seriously did not know it. I was introducing myself. And he said, it's Robert, but people call me Rob. I said, well, what do you like to be called? And he said, Robert. And his mother said, I didn't know that. We were off to the races. That was, and, and unfortunately, I believe I had no impact whatsoever. And you can't. In a couple of hours of being with somebody, there's no impact if they don't want to have impact. But he showed a lot of vulnerability on that, and I appreciated that because apparently in 7 seasons he had shown no feelings until that moment. So it was a fun thing to do, but it's not like people say, "Oh, you're the Kardashians' therapist." No, I did 1 episode with them. If I was the Kardashians' therapist, I would hope to have more effect.
Oh, I love that. So let's talk about what's next for you. You just wrote this amazing book, The Divine Traumatty of Nicki Joy. It's a true crime.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I'll tell you what's next. In March, I'm doing a TEDx talk, biggest stage in the world. Love that. This, a small community where I'm doing it. So it's very exciting. And then, of course, it takes the TEDx people in the sky, where they are, the organizers do, you do your own talk and then it goes to TEDx. So probably come out in April or May, I'm not sure. And meanwhile, I have an online academy called Live Wise Academy. And it's really all about love, loving self and loving other, the divine, if you want to bother with that kind of thing. So it's got all kinds of tools and plugs and whistles and videos and podcasts and blogs and some clients talking about their, I work with clients on it, and I'm going to be really promoting that, which I created it and then life happened and I just would never promote it. So I'm really going to be doing that. And so I'm hoping, my hope is in this final quarter of my life that I will be speaking countrywide, certainly, and hopefully worldwide, and that I will be able to teach people through my online courses. Of course, I'll still be doing in-person things, but I'd like to reach more people because, I don't know that I don't think there's anything new. I really don't. I don't think I'm teaching something nobody's ever heard of. But what I do think is that I am approachable and I have a way of saying, look, I really, 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 really know I have been there and I mean it. I know I have a client who worked with me for a few years and did all my workshops and courses. And she came to my book launch and she said, am I going to hear some stories I've never heard before? And I said, probably, because I teach this story. Probably. And then she said to me, you'd always said, I know what you're feeling. I've been there. I don't know how you're feeling or whatever, but I have been there. I've done that. I have done what you're doing. And in her case, it was true. There's a lot of resonance with it. And she said, I know you always said you understood and that you've done that. You've been there. She said, you've really been there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think there's something that everybody, at least somebody has experienced, at least one thing that you've gone through in this book.
Whether it's, marriage problems or bad choices or addiction. The world is full of addiction, whether it's food or work or whatever. There's a lot of ways to be an addict. Or whether it's death and dying or self-esteem or feeling like you don't fit in or you'll never be good enough to be really loved. Or, I used to think love. I couldn't feel love for my husband. I would think love for my husband. And I did love him in my fashion. And I thought, well, that's just the way it is for me. I would say that out loud. I know that's the way it is. I just don't, I'm just not that person. It's just nonsense. I just was protecting myself the whole time from my fear of loss. And like one more heartbreak was going to be the end of me. I would just explode in about like the Wicked Witch of the West. You throw a little heartbreak water on me and I'm going to turn to ashes.
But yet it all led you to what you call the love of your life, the relationship, the love of your life, and that baby boy coming back to you as a grandson.
It's amazing. I've never quite thought of it that way, Melissa. So you've given me a gift today.
See,
I never put those things together. We're very local about the way we figure that out generally. I would have, if I was looking at me, you told me the story, I bet I would have said that. But I've never thought of that. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
But again,
man, I mean, I want to continue talking to you forever because I know, but pretty soon people are going to like turn it out and say, I can't go on anymore. So I invite you to come back on, especially.
I would love that, Melissa.
Have your TEDx come up or you want to start doing that course that you're wanting.
Yeah.
Let's have you come back on because I just enjoy talking to you and your story is so well written. You don't censor anything. And that's what I think a lot of authors do in their books. And when they write memoirs, they don't put a lot of stuff, but you put the details in there. And there's things that we didn't even get into that I think people would find interesting as well. But this was such a well-written book.
Well, thank you so much. I love that. I invite you to write a review on Amazon and anybody else who reads it, you can get it at stucknomore.com. That's my website /books. But, and there's a lot of videos and other podcasts and you'll be on there too soon, on the website, just so that you can get, and some free information and meditate, I just want to reach as many people as I can right now. It's fun for me. I love it. It's invigorating. I hear people retire. I don't know what that means, but I don't know. I do know what it means, of course. I just don't know what they do with that. I mean, okay, anyway, but I feel really fabulous about the life I'm living right now. And I'm very proud to be both the cautionary tale and the glad result, I keep saying it's never too late to find love, real love. It's never too late to be real love able. And it's never too late to discover your best and highest self, whatever that means. Doesn't mean I don't have bad days. I'm not grumpy. I fall all the time and fall and fail. And so what? That's the learning place, isn't it? A client said to me today, and I hear this often, I'm like, gosh, that suggestion, that sounds really uncomfortable. And I said, yay, that's the gold. That's where you go. If you want to know what to do next, be uncomfortable. That's the thing to go do.
I love that. That. And actually, this podcast started because I was in a mindset challenge and I was uncomfortable with being in front of the camera. And they said, go live and talk about one of your core values, and it was relationships. So I was like, okay, I'm going to bring a friend on because it's easier talking to a friend when you go live than it is talking to just the camera, just to anybody. So that's what happened. And that's 2020. Chats from the Block Cabin happened.
Look at that. Look at that. Good for you. It's very exciting. Well, Melissa, thank you so much for your attention and intention and how you've been so supportive during this, and for that brilliant gift you gave me at the end. That's really something. I'm going to be working with that for the rest of the day, maybe the rest of my life. Who knows? And I would love to see you again. And I look forward to, I might even listen to this one. Who has time? I mean, I did a lot of things last year. So these are just I'm excited. So you have my information.
Sure
I look
do.
forward to seeing you again.
All right. So guys, if you look in the QR code right above Nicki's head, you will see there's a QR code, and it is to Amazon. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can just pull your phone up, click it. It'll send you right over to Amazon to her book. So you don't even have to type anything in. It's all right there. It's one of the things I love about using StreamYard. And Dr. Nicki, thank you so much for coming on and for sharing your heart, for writing this amazing book. And you spared nothing in this book. You laid it out on the line. I mean, there's so much more that we could have delved into. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Okay, until next time, guys, I'll put in the show notes where you can find Dr. Nicki. And also, if you're not looking on YouTube, I will put in the link as well to her book. Until next time, guys. Bye.
Bye.